Gerard Pique has announced that he is retiring and that Saturday's game against Almeria will be his last at the Camp Nou. He really has won it all with Barca in the 15 seasons he's played for them, and of course with Spain as well, winning the World Cup and the European Cup twice as well. I'm getting lost in my thoughts here. I know we are. Anyway, Barcelona, as we know, 3 Champions League, 2 trebles in that time, and also so many things to look back on when it comes to his career. But the times that you look at now with him, it does maybe start a conversation that goes a little bit of a different way as we welcome in Lowe and Nedum. And Sid, I want to start with you to ask you, why now? Why now with Gerard Pique?
I think the answer to that really is a combination of factors, and I think the 2 fundamental factors are footballing and economic. The awareness of the institutional problems that Barcelona have, the awareness that his salary is a problem to them, his commitment to Barcelona, as he made very clear in that video. And of course, you know, it's perhaps easy to do at this point, but I think it's absolutely true what he says in terms of a lifetime as a Barcelona fan, a Barcelona member from the day that he was born, because his family are all Barcelona fans, and he's been aware, I think, of the impact of his enormous salary, and his salary has been enormous on the club, and therefore a desire to kind of deal with that as soon as possible. But then there's the footballing side of it, and that's becoming increasingly aware that he doesn't have a place in this team, that even when players are injured, he's not a guy that's going to get a place in the side. At the start of the summer, Xavi Hernandez had, of course, started to look at alternatives at central defence. Koundé came in, Christensen came in, there'd been other players, even Marcos Alonso playing at central defence when it's not really his role. And Pique had said in the summer, look, whatever you think, whoever you bring in, I will fight for my place and I will prove that I'm good enough to play. And I think what's happened, of course, over the last 4 or 5 months is that he's seen that even if he believes he is, Xavi doesn't. Then, of course, in that game that he had against Inter Milan, he was really quite disastrous, to be honest. And I think it's him realising that actually it's better to go out at the top than to be forced out at a time when you've hung on for too long.
Now, there's a suggestion coming and reports stating, Sid, that he's actually going to be forfeiting the rest of his contract. And obviously, it's unconfirmed right now. We've seen Joan Laporta come out and say that the exit agreement is actually being finalised, but they have recognised that there's a great attitude from the player to help. Are you hearing anything similar to that in Spain? What's the reaction been there?
Well, of course, it's not the first time. And last season, remember when Memphis Depay joined the club and you know, that kind of first wave of new players coming in, it was Gerard Pique who took a pay cut. And actually, as it turned out, that was slightly misreported in the sense that it was more a pay deferral than a pay cut to enable Barcelona to register those players. There's been a willingness from him all the way along, although it is also true that willingness hasn't necessarily reached the point of saying, like, that's it, don't worry, don't pay me anything at all. And I think that's what Laporta was trying to make the point about this evening, to say, this isn't about a player saying, right, I don't want any of the money that's due to me. It is about reaching an agreement for what the Spanish always refer to as a finiquito, essentially the kind of the severance pay, but that there is an awareness and a willingness from Pique to say, we deal with this in a way that helps the club out. And the club, in truth, have been desperate to get rid of the 3 captains for economic reasons, Busquets, Jordi Alba and Gerard Pique. Perhaps Busquets a little bit less than the other 2. And this is, from a financial point of view, very good news for them. Although, of course, it's very sad that it ends this way, and it does feel a little strange, doesn't it, for it to happen halfway through the season. But I think, as I say, that's a response to a growing realisation that his role within the team was extremely limited.
Were you surprised to see the timing of it, Ale?
Yes, certainly, because if there was ever a time in which Barcelona could potentially use Gerard Pique, it's right now, given the injuries. But to Sid's point, and I think this is something that guys who are on the verge of retiring start to realize, is that there are players out there that the coach chooses to put in the field ahead of you that you know full well are not better than you. And at that point, it's so very difficult to continue to go on, to continue to motivate yourself. Because I must imagine that Gerard Pique, even at the bench, he's sitting down and saying, Marcos Alonso playing center back instead of me? Huh? That guy instead of me? Christensen playing instead of me? There is so much history of success from Gerard Pique at Barcelona and with the national team that it's so very difficult to then see a guy who we know in his time in Chelsea could not really defend all that well, comes to Barcelona and Xavi says, I'd rather put you over here rather than Gerard Pique. That is a very clear message from Xavi that not only are you not part of the plans now, the future, or anytime soon. You're simply not part of the plans. You have been erased. And when you have been erased as a player, well, again, with that history of success, you have no choice but to say, I'm either a cheerleader the rest of the year or I walk away. And having the role of a cheerleader is not for everybody. Having that presence in the locker room is not for everybody. And if in the end you're not motivated enough to say, I'm going to continue to fight because you don't see that there's going to be an opportunity for you, even if you fight, then it starts to make sense as to why Gerard Pique will walk away right now.
It happened fast, Nedum.
Yeah, it certainly did. But in some ways, I kind of understand it. When you look at, say, all the honours which he had, which you highlighted at the start, it's so much that it's quite hard to even read off. So I think to then find himself in a position where he knows he's not going to be playing at all, regardless of whatever he does, I think as a player in your 30s, that's a really tough moment of reckoning. Because throughout your career, you probably believe that it's a fair fight. You're being selected, you're the best, and so on and so forth. But when it makes no difference what you do in terms of your selection, you are faced with the question, well, what do I do next? I think for him, the success that he's had, the money that he's made, he can walk away from the game. Not everybody would be in the same position. Some might say they need to go elsewhere, needs to try and find some football somewhere. But he's achieved it all. He's literally won everything. And he's done it at the club which is so dear in his heart. And so for him, this is the way that he's going to be going out. And, I think Sid mentioned the point about leaving at the top. Even though, he's essentially done better for Barcelona in times gone by, if his leaving helps the club go forward, then he's still a hero and he knows that he's done his bit as well. It's a tough spot to be in because he's still a very good player, even if he's not playing week in, week out and showing it. But the fact is, at some point, when you have clubs who are trying to build for the future, you in your 30s doesn't really bode well for you wanting to be a part of that. It's a tough call for him, but he's had an incredible career. And also, I know some people who were playing with him when he was playing in the reserves at Manchester United all that time ago, and they didn't believe that he'd be as successful as he is today. So he's had a fantastic career, had it at two of the best clubs in the world, and with which one of them was, a club so dear to his heart. So it's a shame to see him leave, but he certainly left a lot of good memories, and I guess the future's going to be bright for him.
And even if there has been a decline in recent seasons, he actually did play a pretty big role last season with Barcelona. Just looking at this, 36 starts in 40 games, 6 in terms of minutes played, and in terms of games played, 7th as well among the rest of the squad. So I suppose when you do look at that, Shaka, you look at it and you do think, wow, it does seem pretty early.
It does,
this season,
especially when you consider we're only 3 months into this new season. Now, which leads me to wonder how much of this is based around Barcelona's old struggles in terms of going out of the Champions League and losing to Real Madrid. Now, it's one thing to defer his payment, as Sid was pointing out, in an effort to sign new players, and then all the promises of the new players this summer and what you thought or what you hoped Barcelona would be. So now I'm wondering, was Gerard Pique thinking, I would love to be here for this one season where we regain top billing in Spain, where we are again recognized as one of the really big boys in European football, and that would be the perfect exit for me. But to then see it come crashing down as it did, and to Ali's point, when you get to a certain point in your career, and we've all been there, where you start looking at the pitch, you start looking around, regardless of what position you play, and you start thinking, if I can't get in ahead of these players, then what am I doing here? And then if you thought it was to see the club that you grew up loving regain top spot, and then that's snatched away from you, then all of a sudden it really leaves you feeling a little bit disjointed in terms of, well, what's next? What's next for me? What's next for the football club? And probably thinking, let me see if I can arrange an exit. Let's see how that impacts January and what's to come for the rest of the season and into next. Because otherwise, the timing of it just, you don't see players retiring in the first week of November. It's just not, unless it's due to injury. It's just not done. So you just wonder what is different about this for Gerard Pique.
And you also don't see players leaving money on the table.
Yeah.
This amount of money on the table. That in itself is a question that Pique is going to have to answer, and Barcelona is going to have to answer. How do they figure out what the future of Pique is within the club? Because we assume he's going to have a role in the club at some point.
He did make a video to announce this today. It was put across social media. He did say he would be back as he looked longingly up at the presidential palco. Sid, we'll give you the final word on this and what we've seen from Gerard Pique today.
Yeah, I think we've all assumed for a very long time that at some point Gerard Pique will be president of Barcelona. I think we know that he has the intelligence, he has the, if you like, the kind of the political awareness. Of course, he's now the owner of Andorra, who are playing in the second division, so there's a degree of preparing himself there. If indeed that's the case, if indeed he doesn't just end up taking Andorra as far as he can, and perhaps even into the first division. So I think he will be back in some capacity at some point. He will always be connected to the club, but I think now's the time to walk away. And I'm reminded as well, by the way, of something he said around about, I'm trying to think, around about 6 or 7 months ago, I think he said something along the lines of, I don't want to retire on the bench. You know, I want to go out playing, and if I'm on the bench, if I'm not useful, then I will walk away. And I think that's fundamentally what's happened.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.